The machine for keeper and dynasty leagues can be found under the My Team roster tab. The first time you load the machine for dynasty, it's going to ask you to define your league, whether you have a keeper league or dynasty league. The difference between a dynasty and a keeper league is very important to understand. A dynasty league is a league where you keep any number of players, but don't have to pay any draft picks for them. A keeper league is similar, but in order to keep a player, you have to pay a draft pick for them. This is the only time you will see the choice for a dynasty, redraft, or keeper league on this screen. If you do make a mistake, you'll be able to change this later in the machine. This demo is for a keeper league. If you do not have a keeper league, please watch our dynasty video instead. In order to properly assess the value of the keepers in your league, the machine has to understand your league-specific keeper rules. The first thing it needs to know is how many players you may keep. The second thing it needs to know is if you have any restrictions on what rounds you are allowed to give up for a player. In this example, I could not give up a first or second round pick for a player. The next thing the machine needs to know is whether or not there is a penalty over last year's draft. In this example, I have a 2-round penalty on a draft pick taken last year. So, if I took Andrew Luck in the 7th round last year, I would have to surrender a 5th round draft pick to keep him this year. And the last thing the machine needs to know is what round a free agent would cost me. This would be any player I picked up during the course of the year. If you made a mistake in your initial setup of your league, it is very easy to correct. You simply have to go to the League Setup tab, CBS, make a change, and save it to the Advanced Sports Logic server. Now, when you come back in, your changes will be kept. It's very important to understand the difference between the pre-draft and draft state of the machine in keeper leagues. In the pre-draft state, the machine needs to understand what your draft picks were last year. In the draft state, the machine looks at your draft board this year. If you are manually inputting the data into pre-draft and draft, you will not be able to switch between these two very easily. Unless your CBS league is linked with last year's draft, you'll have to manually input the round your players were drafted in. You have to do that so that the machine understands which players are good keepers and which players are bad keepers. You can do that under League Setup, Roster Management, and you can enter in the overall pick where your player was taken. For example, if Cam Newton was the first pick of the 2nd round, he was the 11th overall pick in my 10-team league. I can do this for each of the players on my team and any of the other teams in my league, and then I want to save to the Advanced Sports Logic server. The machine allows me to customize my simulated draft results and my draft pick recommendations. I can do this under League Setup, Draft Position Settings, and from here I can tell it the earliest round I want it to consider certain positions. For example, I have a 14-round draft. If I don't want to see a kicker until the last round, I select 14. If I don't want to see a defense until the second to last round, I select 13. If I don't want to see a defense at all and I want to pick my own, I can set this to 15, and a defense will never be recommended for this draft. Now that I have everything set up, let's use the machine's Keeper Recommendations tool. That can be found under the Pre-Draft tab, Keeper Recommendations. Now, the machine runs a simulated draft of your league so that it can understand which draft picks should be given up for which players for your keepers. This is very important to run, and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to run, somewhere in that range. You click Start Simulated Draft Now, and then your draft will start. Now that the simulated draft is completed, we're really going to see a payoff for all that work we did. Now, the machine has simulated the entire season to give us some really important information. The first thing we have to think about is this league allows for three keeper picks. I have 2 quality keepers. That's important to know because that means I either have to try to get another keeper, keep someone who isn't ideal, or just use that draft pick. So it's found 3 other teams that it thinks has extra keepers. Now, that doesn't mean these are the only teams I should try to trade with. Some teams aren't going to have the machine, so they're not going to understand, which players are ideal to keep and which players aren't. These are some of the players from those teams. that I might possibly try to trade for. And below that, we have my players that the machine thinks I should keep. Now, what all these numbers mean? Well, the player value is that player's impact on my chances to win the championship. The ideal pick to keep, that's the last possible pick that could be used to keep that player. So that's the last pick in the 4th round and the last pick in the 10th round. The ideal keeper value percent, that's the percent difference in a player selected at that position between that player and Dez Bryant, or that player and Andy Dalton. So these guys are a pretty good percent value increase over those draft picks. Now, the best pick to keep, that's my current pick in that round. And the keeper value is the same thing as the ideal keeper pick, but it's using my pick instead of the last pick in that round. Now, why do we do that? Because there's this opportunity to improve here. If we can find a way to give up the 4-10 and the 10-10 pick, we're going to increase our chances to win by this much. So those are some very important things to look at. The machine doesn't just stop with that. It looks at these teams and sees that they have higher draft picks than me in the rounds that I'm selecting Dez Bryant and Andy Dalton in. So it says, hey, maybe you can swing a trade with these teams and get some increased value there. Not only that, it sees teams where, hey, they might be keeping a player in this round. So you have a higher pick in those rounds than they do. Maybe you should trade that pick away and they would get some increased value there. They'd give up your pick instead of their pick. Not only that, it gives us an entire table here of all the players that, hey, we might be able to make good keeper values with. Let's see if maybe we can trade for Alfred Morris. He is probably the best keeper in this league, which makes sense because he was a free agent last year. Tom Brady's a great keeper value. He was selected late last year. So all of this is showing us keeper values and sorting the players by it and showing us maybe what players we can target to improve our teams. So we've just been armed with a ton of great information. Now, what can we do with that information? Well, the machine also has a trade analysis tool. And this powerful tool uses all the information gathered from this simulated draft, and that tool can be found under the Pre-Draft tab, Trade Analysis. The machine's Trade Analysis tool uses all that great keeper information we had from our previous screen, and shows us a value table of all the players in our league, and all the teams in our league with their players, and their draft picks. Now, what this gives you is the ability to see which teams might have players you might want, and how much your draft picks are worth, and how much your players might be worth. If a player doesn't have a value, then they aren't worth the draft pick you would have to give up to get that player. Armed with this information, it's really easy to find mutually beneficial trades. Now, how the machine analyzes a trade is with this trade evaluation table. Now, what this does is dynamically, as I select players and picks from above, it fills out my current keepers, that team's estimated keepers, what I'm getting in the trade, what I'm giving up in the trade, and what our keepers, picks, and values look like after a trade. So, the first thing I thought of was, well, I'm paying this 4-4 for Dez Bryant, so let's make that the 4-10. So now I'm getting the 4-10 for Dez Bryant. And I also need another keeper. So I need, let's say, Dennis Pitta, because I think he'll give him up pretty easily. Now, all I really have to do here is surrender the 4-4 pick. And what's happening is I'm essentially giving a pick I'm already going to give up for Dez Bryant, and I'm getting a player that can be my third keeper. Now, if we look at what happened here, I'm getting Dennis Pitta, like I said, in the 4-10, like I said, and I'm moving him up 6 spots in that 4th round. And this is helping both of us because I'm giving up this pick anyway, so there's no real effect to me. I'm gaining this player, and he moved up 6 whole spots. And that makes it very easy to find these mutually beneficial trades. And once I've done this several times, I'll want to simulate the entire draft again and see which trades work out the best for us. So I'm going to add this to the simulation queue, and that puts in the estimated values of it. But the simulated draft, once we run it again, will give us a concrete value at the end. So I'm going to find one more trade, and then we'll see which trades we want to pursue. Here's another case where the machine allows for a really mutually beneficial trade and really gives you extra opportunities here. I look at this Team 9, and I see that they have 1 5th-round pick they're probably going to keep, and 2 9ths. But they only have their 1 9th-round pick, obviously. So I should be able to offer him a 9th-round pick that he will then use on Lamar Miller for an 8th-round pick. And that should really help both of us. He gets to keep both of his players, and I get to move up a whole round. So this really should help both of us. And as we can see, the table shows up. He's got an increase in value because he's able to keep both of these players. And I have an increase in value because I've moved up a whole round. Now, if I wanted to get greedy, I could try to move up to the 7th round. But this trade helps us both. So I'm going to add this to the queue. And now I'm just going to click Start Simulations. And it's going to simulate the draft again and see how it helps us. And this sums up all the things the machine can do for you in keeper leagues before the draft is even started.